Alright, today we're going to play with the juniper. I'm going to do a little bit of trimming to prune it back and a little bit of wiring. Bring some of these branches down and create a little better silhouette. With these, you just have to be careful and know that majority of the time, whatever you do, regardless of whether you pinch the tips like some say, or cut them with scissors, or bonsai pruners, the tips are going to get a little brown, and that's just, there's not really a way that I've seen yet that has shown me that there's an option. This one obviously doesn't have it because it hasn't been pruned in a while. And ideally you could wire this all out and then prune it, but I like to go through and at least get the stuff that I know is going to come off anyway, rather than wiring it. If you just need to practice, go ahead. What I'm looking for here is mainly, right now I'm kind of working the crown. I'm not going to do much with this little section here. It's going to be more bringing these branches down in here and bringing this one around. One of the things I'm trying to do is kind of keep the different levels or segments or whatever you want to call them, somewhat uniform. So if there's a branch that's coming up higher than everything else or outside of a silhouette that I want to create, then I'm taking it off. But I'm going in, and if you look right here, the branches are plentiful there. So I want to make sure I cut right above one of those branches that can develop, and just kind of take the tips off, bringing it down to where I want it. Now, with these, they do get a lot of under the branch cuttings that are just coming straight down. And well, a lot of times we try to bring branches down. We don't want to start there because it doesn't look. I mean, it's a natural grow on the tree, but when we're creating that pattern, we don't want to bring a branch up from underneath, and also, like with other trees, the ones that are coming straight up. See, this is nice. Get in there and see, we got a nice branch here. It's coming out. It's got nice development. I mean, alone, this little piece here would develop into a nice little tree. And that one will get wired out. That can be utilized. The thing with junipers is they're so tight and compact the majority of the time that if you don't take off some of the growth, you're going to really have your work cut out while you're trying to wire around it all. Bring some of this down. Haven't decided if I'm going to keep this branch, mainly because after it's developed over time, it still hasn't really became much. And I can bring it up, I can bring it over, but I don't see the value of keeping this as a branch. And I have a little bit of development here, but this will probably come off as well. And what it helps to do too is kind of know the pot you're going to put it in. I'm not quite ready to do potting on this one. So, and I don't have a specific pot picked out for this one just yet. But if you know what kind of pot you're doing, then a lot of times you can use different aspects of the tree to your advantage in the pots. If I was working with maybe a little bit of a cascade, I could bring these branches down in that type of pot and have them weep over the edge. In a standard pot, most bonsais, you won't see them growing up like this. If they do come up, they're going to have a bend in them, and they're not going to be a straight up deal. Now if you look in right here, I'm taking out most of the top growing branches because I want to be able to get in there and wire, and right in through here in between the little branches that I'm going to try and develop a little more. Just got to be able to get wire in there. So I'm just taking off those little nubs. They're going to get in the way. Now wiring, isn't complicated. But it is complicated. It depends on what kind of wire you're using. I primarily use aluminum wire, but the experts that have been doing it for a lot longer, and the people that plan to show their trees during the time when they have wire on them, will generally need copper wire. The difference being the copper generally blends into the tree a little better than the aluminum, and aesthetically it's a little more appealing. But aside from that and the strength, you can use a smaller copper wire than you use of an aluminum wire. And get the same result. The biggest con with the aluminum wire is after you start bending it, because it's anized or anized, or I don't know how to pronounce it. Is that it starts to harden pretty fast, and then you can't manipulate it as much as you can with the aluminum wire. So unless you're planning on showing your tree real soon, or going to be in some competition then. It's not really a big deal. See, this little guy is a little interesting, but I think he's going to have to go. And what you can do with junipers, which you don't generally do with a lot of other trees, is create deadwood with old branches. And that could be an option with this. But when you do that, you generally want to make sure it's not a straight cut, because that just doesn't look natural. Junipers oftentimes get carved out too, to create more interest in the trunk. Get this little guy here. So I'm gonna have to do a little more selective branching options on it before I wire it, or it's gonna be next to impossible to wire, just because you would be going over every branch. And you generally want to select alternating branches, and you want to make sure you're not getting the lower branches. I'm somewhat content with that. We got this, and this will fill back in. They're not real fast growing, but they're not slow growing trees either. Now most of this can be wired with fairly small wire. The test, see what kind of wire you're using, this is about a 5 or 6 gauge, is to move the branch by sticking about 3 to 4 inches out. And if it moves the branch and it doesn't bend, then it's the right gauge wire for what you're doing. Now ideally you want something as small as possible that still does that. In a pinch, and what I often do is use a smaller wire, because it allows me to manipulate more of the branches off of one. And depending on where I'm going to use it, this one I'm going to use on the lower section here, because I can work this out, and 2 wires together, this moves somewhat easy. I might have to throw an extra piece on it, but it'll definitely do what I need with this, that I really want to bring over. But when you're doubling up the wire like this, you also have to be careful. Some people don't like to do it, but you just have to be careful that you don't put too much force on it. Now, if you're bending a branch up, ideally you want to have your leverage on the upside, not on the downside. If you're bending the branch down, you want to be able to work where you can manipulate the branch down. And you want to basically create almost an S going down the tree, and you want to be careful that you are bending the wire and not bending the branch. What I do, it's probably hard to see, is I stick my hand or my finger in front of the wire, bend it, and then put my thumb behind it so that the wire is bending on my finger and not on the tree. And I'm going to have to use this extra piece. But as I bring this down, this wire is going to go to a different branch so that I can bend that branch as well. And I'm using the same piece of wire, just using it in two different places. And that gives me a little more leverage on the branch. Ideally, we could use smaller wire on this, but this will allow the branch room to grow, so I keep it a little loose, just because this stuff's still green. Once it hardens off, it'll be a little easier to move. Right now, it's more prone to break the branch or something else along those lines. Now, that's what I've got right here. If you look close, you can see the wires doubled over here, here, and here. Some frown on it. I say if it works, it works. And we have two little pieces here that we need to work in. Get a couple here that need to come down and be manipulated. So I'll probably use a smaller wire on that. We don't need a lot of leverage here because these branches are small. And one of the ways that I was taught along the way is just to simply do a loop around the branch. And then you use the leverage from each of the branches to hold the other one in place. And also, this is a green branch, so it's going to move fairly easy. Anyway. And most of your really nice junipers, this is how they get them there. They wire them out. It's the only way you can get a nice, natural, or somewhat natural growing pattern. And one of the things you want to keep in mind when you're wiring, the purpose of wiring is to create space for the branches to grow and also allow them to get sunlight. If the branches are competing for sunlight, one's going to win, one's going to lose. The wire allows you can manipulate the height, space, depth of the tree. This guy's gonna come off because while I'd like to develop that, and I could, um, it's gonna counteract what I'm doing here, and I can work this out a little better to in the future develop more that way. So this would be a good option, and I may leave it. Just take the tip for now. And I'm going to take it off because it's in the way. So now I'm going to move this branch over so I can bring this one down. I'm going to keep it up just slightly. So I have these other pads that I can work with. And then we have these two here, still need to be wired. And these are actually going to become one. And with this, I'm actually going to work this branch and this branch together. I'm going to get my smaller wire. This is my nightmare roll. It was pulled all out of whack, so this is anybody that does bonsai's pet peeve. And I've had this wire for a while. And it works for back, but I didn't know quite as much. And I still don't know all. So we're going to bring it around. I'm just going to worry mainly about following the same line as the other wire. I could double it over, but what I'm wanting to do with it is going to cause me to do what many consider a no-no and cross over wire. Or, because these are both smaller branching, I might be able to get away with coming in from the top, and that's what I'm going to try. So yep, that's going to work. And just be careful that as you manipulate it, you're not taking off future branching that you want to keep. Also, any of the spots you have to cross over, make sure there's not a branch there or greenery there. If there is, you might as well take it off because it's going to be pinched off by the wire. Ta-da. And now this line, I'm just going to follow my previous wire down until I get to the branch that I'm working with. Also, when you're doing this, now this is a little more complicated because of the space I'm working in, and sometimes you have to do a little finagling to get what you need. It's not always easy, especially with junipers, to get in there where you need to be to really be able to manipulate the branch that you're working on. And here I have a lot of options, but this one has the most ability to develop, and it'll develop more along where this new green is as it hardens. So I'm going to go with the center one here, just because I got a little more options on the end here. And I'm just going to go ahead and take the tip out, and that'll cause it to back bud, or one of the other branches to take over as the lead. So now we've got the two lower branches of this tree wired out, and I can go ahead and bring them over to where I was wanting to start. Sometimes if your branching isn't moving or it's bouncing back, sometimes it just takes tightening the wire a little. You'll have to pay more attention to it, but then you can manipulate it a little better. This is going to come back here. So this is going to take a heavier wire. It's going to come back like this. Now, with this one, because I'm having this little curvature here, and I have branches coming off here, I kind of have to decide. Now, this would be a nicer branch. The problem is it's going straight towards what I want to do, so it has to come off. Now, for the bigger a lot of times, if you're going to do a branch like this, it's good to find another one that you can work the same, that's going to take about the same gauge wire, so you can utilize your wire the best. One wrap or two wraps around the trunk, it can sometimes work, but you're going to limit how much space you have available to wire other things by having a bunch of single individual things wired. One of the other tricks some people use is just tying it down. They create a loop with a piece of like aquarium tubing or something, and bring the branch down and just hold it in place until it stays. That's basically what wire does. That's what you're going for, is just holding it in place until it stays. But here I don't see, aside from this, and I believe I can use a smaller piece, another one that I'm going to use with this, so I'm going to go ahead and go with the individual wire. For all that said, he's going with the individual wire. He's doing what he said not to do. Sometimes with the heavier stuff, you can stake it into the pot a little. Gives you a little bit more leverage. Just be careful if you only got a few roots that you're not damaging the roots as well. Now I want to bring it down, but if I was to grab this the way it is right now, it would break right there. So I'm going to make an extra wrap, come up just above it, and then bring it down. Now there's a trick with this as well. You have to be careful because I could break it bringing it down as well. But there's not a lot of options here because this already has a little bit of a crook in it to be able to get it the way I want to do it, ideally. That's the thing about bonsai, is everybody has their way of doing things, and a lot of them were trained that their way is the only way. And a lot of them have beautiful trees, and their way works for them. But if it works, do it. If it doesn't, don't worry. Here we go. Now, ideally I would wire this out a little more. I think for now I'm just going to do a little bit of pruning and prune it down. For the time being, just to speed up the process a little bit, and because it's still going to have to come back anyway, and I got to work with branches above it, so and even if I was going to wire it, they wouldn't be that long. You want to create a nice little pad. And now sometimes what you'll find, instead of bringing your branches down, you will have created a situation where some of your branches are now underneath. And if that's where you're going to leave the branch, those are going to have to come off. Now don't always take off every little new thing, because that's how you develop your finer branching. And I've only more recently listened to that a little more. And it really shows in the trees because you get more development, more refinement that way. Now keep in mind,